we're trying to keep our work focused on and driven by and inspired by a greater sense of moral purpose.
James, I'm really looking forward to this chat because since I spoke to you last, you've come into a new building, which is the main campus, and you've now got your second year of students, the new cohort.
That's it.
In terms of culture, how's it all going?
Only positively, really, and we have plenty of markers to gauge that positive culture. But one thing that we were very excited about was the prospect of spending time with 80 Year 7 students last year in a very small space to really focus hard on building that positive and inclusive student culture with that foundation group of students, knowing that we're going to be able to transplant that across into a large, largely unpopulated building. So we don't have the combination of teething problems of being new in a building, but also having the dual responsibility of building student culture at the same time. So that's been an advantage for us. So
when we initially talked culture, you talked about the real importance in terms of those foundation students in setting the standard.
That's right.
Has that played out? Do you still think that's as important as it was?
Absolutely it is. And I was pleasantly surprised that both foundation and establishment students seem to be on board, but they both cohorts have a big role to play in forming a positive student culture here in the short and mid-term, and also what kind of legacy these students are setting as well. So what kind of school it is 10, 20, 30 years after they leave, because that will play out.
Wow. I mean, there's nothing more powerful than a good story. So what is that story? What's emerging? What's the story of the school?
Yeah, there's a few different threads. So a lot of the narrative I'm actually talking about is this idea that we want to seize this golden opportunity we have. This is a once in a generation opportunity to build a school from scratch. Seize the golden opportunity to be not just a very good or excellent co-educational public school, but an exceptional co-educational school, a beacon school, a school that other schools can learn from. We're trying to keep our work focused on and driven by and inspired by a greater sense of moral purpose for public education, and that is that if we can be the very best public school we can, if we can be excellence localised, is another kind of a phrase we're throwing around quite often, we hope that we can play a significant role in the public education system to redress social inequity, which is vast in Australia, one of the worst in terms of developed countries. And I think a big part of educating parents about choices, I think, is around trying to change the conversation in terms of, rather than those those summative results like the VCE results or the NAPLAN results, for instance, and looking more at value-added data, like what are those schools doing for the students that come into their school? What value are they adding to those students? Yeah. And the other thing that we talk mostly about is, in terms of culture, is that in a local government school, public school, you are much more representative of your local community, so that it normalises difference within your school. So you are actually helping to develop human beings that are familiar with difference and accepting and celebrating of difference. I think that's also part of the public narrative or the discourse that probably needs to be talked about more as well. I think, we will be, rightly or wrongly, we'll be judged on our NAPLAN results, we'll be judged on our VCE results, as all the schools are. But it's very easy for schools to cave under that pressure, whether it's parents, public discourse, department, whatever it might be. So then it does get into the training for NAPLAN, it does get into these VCE subjects are scaled up, so we'll only offer these kinds of subjects to students. And then what you're doing is you're narrowing opportunities for students. You are narrowing the respect for and the celebration of difference. You're really limiting the opportunities for what we want is a school that provides every child the opportunity to identify something they are passionate about in their life and to discover things that they are good at. So our motto as a school is make a difference. Make a difference is about this school working to make a positive and profound difference for the children in our school, but that's only part of the story. The other part of the story is we want those students to go out and make a positive and profound difference out in the wider world. And the key part of that bit is in the endeavours of their choice. If you're doing this, you're not giving them the opportunity to have that choice. Yeah.
The students here seem really settled and engaged.
Yeah.
And when I talk to teachers working in some other schools around the state, including in regional areas, I do hear about these things like kids firing spitballs at their teacher in class and being on their phones and taking photos of them and saying disparaging things, while teaching and learning is meant to be happening.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a real shock, but it does remind me a bit of my own schooling, I've got to be honest. And how do you get the respect? How do you build that?
You make it a core focus strategically and in storytelling. So the leadership team and I talk a lot about this idea of the importance of both storytelling and strategy. You need both. If it's just around the lockers saying good day, or whether it's actually one of my year level coordinators sitting down with a student who's perhaps made a poor choice with their behaviour, linking it to what we call keystone documents in the school. So one of those is our Charter of Respect. We have things called breaches of the Charter of Respect, and there are corresponding logical consequences for that behaviour, but also the required support strategies in place for that level of behaviour too. But I would say though that we work with teenagers. We are not immune to social conflict, to students, teenagers being defiant or whatever else. That exists, but it's actually our approach to it that is perhaps what's working for us, and that's that we don't see these things as fundamental flaws in the person. We see it as a behaviour that the student needs some help with. You can largely mitigate it by focusing hard on developing that positive student culture and investing heavily in those foundation and establishment students to be those leaders through the school every year they're here at the school. So it's something that you've got to develop from the outset, but also cultivate and curate daily in daily practices. So my coordinators, for instance, they do locker meet and greets every morning, making sure every child has an adult saying hello to them. How are you going? How was footy on the weekend? Colin, Victoria and I will always be downstairs saying goodbye to students, where one of us or all of us will be down there every morning saying good morning to all of them.
It's great to hear that, because it was part of Colin's vision,
That's right.
It was one of the first things he said to us is that someone will be there to say good morning every morning.
That's it.
And it's happened.
Exactly.
So let's talk about bullying. It's always a big one when it comes to culture.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, another key foundation idea was that this would be as safe a school as it possibly could be from bullying. How's that going?
Yeah, really well. So we haven't had any instances of bullying this year so far, but I would put the caveat in that, again, we are not immune to bullying. So we did have some instances of bullying last year, but the way we dealt with it meant that it minimised the impact and it transformed some of the behaviours of those students involved and restored some of those relationships. So we talk a lot about, like a lot of schools do, about being having a zero tolerance approach to bullying. Online, verbal, physical, whatever it is what we deem a level 3 breach of the Charter of Respect. It's an automatic external suspension for that child, depending on whether or not external suspensions will work for that particular child, because in some instances suspending someone
might make it worse
because they perhaps don't have the support at home. So that might be translated as an internal suspension, where they stay in my office or in the head of sub-school office. That's the consequence of it. But we work really hard on those restorative practices with that. So the focus is on, first and foremost, getting them to reflect on their behaviour, and we have processes for that, and then re-engaging them with their learning. So it's getting on with the learning and having the support and the relationship building there. And then once they re-engage back with the school, we make sure that we meet with the family and we set goals and develop behaviour plans. And again, none of that is unique to us. I think what is perhaps unique to us is that we as a leadership team know every child, and most children know most children. We don't socially engineer things to demand that every child is friends with every child, but we do demand that everyone is respectful.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about innovations that are happening.
Sure.
Some of the ones that we touched on in the past were things like, no bells, students interviewing the teachers, and there's a whole bunch that are happening here. So let's check in on innovation. What's happening? Sure. What are you excited about? What's working? Sure.
Well, look, the no bells thing and no announcements bit, it was maybe a novelty for our foundation students last year, but this year I would say within 2 weeks no one was talking about it. You don't have the bells, you don't have the announcements, you don't have the interruptions to the learning in class, and I think it probably is having some kind of impact on student independence. Like, they're not reliant on a bell.
It speaks to trust, as does the interviewing teachers.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me more about that.
Oh, that's a really interesting one. So I obviously sat in a number of our teacher interview panels last year, and the leadership team said, well, we've got 2 12-year-olds sitting on our inaugural school council. The attentiveness of the students, not just the scripted questions they asked, but the follow-up questions they asked, the discussions they contributed to. For me, the fact that the students spend the most time with those adults in this space, after 2 interviews through, it only made sense. It just seemed normal. And then now that we're about to start our 2020 recruitment cycle, I think it would be weird and odd that you don't get students involved.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay.
Again, it only just fills those students with more connectedness, pride in, responsibility for the school. Yep.
Are there any other innovations you want to call out? Things that are happening here that may not be completely unique, but are on a leading edge, trying something new? Yep.
I would say that what we're now well and truly into the final stages of development for would be our Year 9 projects. We will be having our Year 9 students working in teams collaboratively throughout the year. They will effectively be studying 5 subjects, but they are interdisciplinary subjects. So we have, for example, the Universe project, which will be science, technology and maths. And then you've got your other 4. But then the one that I think is probably worthwhile mentioning as something being quite different is we have this 6th project, which is called the Entrepreneur Project. And that is actually not done within the school day. It's homework. So in teams, the students go out into the community. They identify issues, challenges, opportunities in this community, and they go through a process of action research to understand the need or the opportunity and develop projects, initiatives to seize that opportunity or to resolve that problem. So we want students to be not just prepared to be job takers, but to be job makers. So I think that's a really exciting innovation that is about to launch next year. The other one I'll briefly touch on is the at Year 10 level, all students will have the opportunity to do up to 6 Unit 1, 2 or 6 Year 11 subjects. Most students will do Year 10 English and Year 10 Maths. Some students, our very capable students in terms of, say, their literacy, may well do Year 11 English. And the smaller percentage of students who are both exceptional in their maths and literacy may well do 8 Year 11 subjects in Year 10. So that is unique. And then the students that perhaps aren't as capable in terms of those particular subject areas, it's a free hit at VCE. Mm-hmm. They get a sense of the subject areas, they get all the support they need, they get the opportunity to study them again the following year if they want. So it's about giving them access to pathways earlier. And then the next step beyond that will be one of very few schools that are part of the Centre for Higher Studies. So our students that get to that Year 12 level and they've already knocked off a handful of Unit 3, 4 subjects already, they may only study 2 Year 12 subjects in Year 12 and they'll be able to start undergraduate subjects in their Year 12.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is real innovation and I really look forward to, seeing how this plays out over time. So thanks again for sharing all of that.
That's all right, Mike. Thank you.
I think there's so much happening at this school to keep an eye on.
Yeah.
To finish up for today, what's the biggest challenge or opportunity facing you for the rest of this year?
I guess the biggest challenge and opportunity is just making sure that we don't lose momentum and lose a sense of urgency, that we don't want to get to 2023 and go, we are a mediocre school. For me, the work with the teachers on their collective efficacy and their support, but also challenging them to continually rise to that challenge, I think that's probably our biggest challenge and opportunity, I think.
Fantastic. Thanks, James. Good on you.